What if the thing women feel first isn't your age? What if it isn't your salary, your status, or the silver in your hair? What if the most magnetic thing about an older man is something you can't post, can't flex, and can't fake for more than 5 minutes? Because there's a specific tell women notice fast, not in what you say, in what you need. And if you're honest, you felt this from the other side too. When someone's presence is calm, but their eyes are asking for something, approval, validation, control, a reaction, that's the difference. Some men walk into a room like they're here to take. Others walk in like they're already complete and the room can either join them or not. Today, we're going into 3 unusual stoic traits that secretly make older men powerfully attractive. The kind of quiet pull that doesn't beg for attention. And yes, this wasn't invented on podcasts. This was forged in the minds of Roman emperors and Stoic philosophers almost 2,000 years ago. The minds of Roman emperors and Stoic philosophers almost 2,000 years ago. But listen carefully. These traits aren't dating tips. They're identity shifts. And the third one is the line between men who merely age and men who actually mature. So let's get straight to it. Trait number 1, cultivated indifference. Now, don't confuse this with being cold. Cold is avoidance. Indifference is mastery. Anyone can be distant. That's easy. But cultivated indifference is rare because it requires something most men don't develop: the ability to remain steady while life tries to shake you. Here's how it plays out. A younger man's flight gets canceled. His plans collapse. He gets criticized at work. He feels disrespected in public. And you can see the storm inside him. He reacts. He vents. He gets visibly stressed. He turns sharp, defensive, performative, or needy. Not because he's weak, because he's living with a hidden rule. If the outside goes wrong, I go wrong. But the stoic-minded man operates with a different rule. He knows the outside world is unstable by default, so he builds his stability somewhere else. The Stoics called it the dichotomy of control. Focus only on what you can control. Your actions, your thoughts, your character, everything else is external. And when you truly internalize that, something changes in your presence. You become a harbor, not a man who doesn't feel, a man who doesn't leak. And women feel that immediately, even if they can't explain it, because here's the psychological truth. Anxiety is contagious. Composure is contagious too. In a world overflowing with drama and nervous systems on fire, a man who stays calm becomes an anchor. Not because he's trying to be impressive, because he doesn't outsource his peace. The Stoics called this apatheia, not apathy, not numbness. Freedom from emotional disturbance. And that's the first open loop you need to hold. Most men think attraction is about intensity. But sometimes the most addictive thing is a man who doesn't spike your nervous system, a man who doesn't create chaos just to feel alive. That's why cultivated indifference is magnetic. He's the rock, not the leaf in the wind. Now, here's the twist, because if you stop here, you'll misunderstand the whole trait. Cultivated indifference isn't just about staying calm when life hits you. It's about what happens when people try to move you. When someone tests you, when a woman pulls back, when the room doesn't validate you, does your mood follow them or lead itself? That's where the attraction really lives. And it brings us into the second trait, the one that instantly separates men who talk to be seen from men who speak because it matters. Trait number 2, the power of deliberate silence. Listen carefully. Younger men often feel the need to fill every silence, not because they're stupid, because they're trying to manage an invisible fear. If I stop, so they talk to impress. Talking, I stop mattering. So they chatur thiti nastur, so they talk to impress. They talk to prove worth. They talk to show how much they know. And the tragedy is most of them don't even realize they're auditioning. But the stoic-minded older man understands something that changes everything. True power doesn't shout. It listens. He isn't silent because he has nothing to say. He's silent because he's observing, understanding, and processing. And when he does speak, his words have weight. Not dramatic weight, not mysterious alpha weight. Real weight, because they're chosen with purpose, not thrown around carelessly. Seneca said, "See, speech is the mirror of the soul. And you can feel this in people. Some men speak like they're trying to cover a wound. Other men speak like they're revealing a decision. A man comfortable in silence shows his inner world is calm, measured, deep. He isn't seeking validation by dominating the conversation. His validation comes from within. And here's why this is so attractive psychologically. Deliberate silence makes people lean in because the human brain is trained to chase what isn't spilled out freely. When you don't over-explain yourself, you communicate self-rust. When you don't rush to fill space, you communicate self-control. And self-control is one of the most persuasive signals of safety. But I'm not going to give you the full conclusion yet because there's a darker layer here. Silence isn't just attractive because it's calm. It's attractive because it filters out the men who are desperate to be perceived. And that brings us to the third trait, the one that truly separates men from boys. Because the ultimate magnetism isn't perfection. It's what you do with the parts of your life that didn't go the way you planned. If this hit a nerve, don't brush it off. That's data. Say it out loud. There's a version of you that thinks your past is a liability. The moment you realized you weren't in control the way you thought you were. And if you're like most men, especially men who've learned to survive by staying composed, your instinct is to keep those chapters sealed. Not because you're ashamed, because you learned a dangerous rule early. If they see where I bled, they'll know where to aim. So, you clean it up. You talk about the highlights. You keep it polished. And then you wonder why, even when you look stable, people don't fully relax around you. Here's the uncomfortable truth. A man who hides his scars doesn't come across as strong. He comes across as managed. And managed men always feel like they're one bad moment away from cracking. That's why trait number 3 is the one that truly separates the men from the boys. Trait number 3, embracing scars. This is the game changer because every man has scars. Failures in business, heartbreaking relationships, moments of deep loss, times you disappointed yourself, times you had to rebuild from zero emotionally, financially, spiritually. Society tells men to hide these things, to move on, to man up, to act like pain is a private glitch you should fix quietly and never mention again. But the truly attractive older man does the opposite. He doesn't advertise his scars like a badge. He doesn't perform vulnerability for attention. He simply isn't afraid of what happened to him. And that's a different kind of power because a scar isn't proof you were damaged. It's proof you were hit and you didn't disappear. Now, this is where most men misread what women are drawn to. They think women want perfection. No, women want emotional consequence handled well. They want to feel that if life gets real, if things get messy, unpredictable, painful, you won't turn cold. You won't spiral. You bonichi achat. You won't become someone they have to manage. So, when an older man can acknowledge his past without bitterness, without shame, without dramatizing it, his entire presence changes. He stops feeling like a fragile statue that can't be touched. He feels like a human being who has been tested and passed. Stoicism has a name for this, a moradi, a love of one's fate, not tolerating your past, not accepting it through clenched teeth, loving it because it made you. That doesn't mean celebrating pain. It means refusing to be at war with reality. And the moment you stop being at war with your own history, you stop giving off the energy of a man trying to outrun himself. That's what people feel. A man who embraces his scars doesn't need to prove anything because he already survived his own judgment. And here's the second perspective shift, the one most men don't expect. A lot of men believe strength is never being hurt. But strength is being hurt and not becoming dangerous because of it, not becoming resentful, not becoming entitled, not becoming reactive, not becoming manipulative. A scar held with maturity becomes empathy. A scar held with denial becomes bitterness, and bitterness has a smell. People may not say it, but they step back because bitterness turns connection into a courtroom. Every woman becomes a symbol. Every conversation becomes a test. Every flirt becomes a power struggle. That's not attraction. That's unresolved pain trying to get paid back. The Stoic man refuses that. He turns the past into fuel, not poison. Marcus Aurelius wrote something that sounds simple until you live it. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. That line is not a quote for posters. It's a psychological operating system. It means your setbacks aren't baggage. They're instruction. Your heartbreaks aren't weaknesses. They're what taught you how not to ruin something good when it finally arrives. Your failures aren't proof you're behind. They're proof you have range. And that's why embracing scars is magnetic. A man who isn't afraid of his past is a man who isn't afraid of the future. He doesn't need life to be perfect, to stay steady. He doesn't need constant reassurance to stay present. He's already met darkness inside himself, inside the world. And he didn't turn into a monster. He turned into someone calmer. And calm built from experience is the most persuasive kind. Now, hold this open loop with me, because we're almost at the point where everything locks together. Cultivated indifference is not emotional numbness. Deliberate silence is not social avoidance. Embracing scars is not weakness. All three are forms of self-command. They tell the same story. This man doesn't need the world to behave for him to remain solid. And if you've ever felt like you were trying to be confident, trying to be attractive, trying to be respected, this is why it felt exhausting, because you were trying to manufacture what Stoicism teaches you to become. Stoicism teaches you to become. If you've made it this far, you're probably not the kind of man who wants to learn lines. You're the kind of man who wants to move differently. Because the truth is, women don't fall for traits the way men imagine. They don't sit there ranking you like a resume. They read something faster. They read your inner posture. And the three Stoic traits we've been talking about, cultivated indifference, deliberate silence, embracing scars, are not separate tricks. They're three signals of one identity. A man who is not emotionally for sale. That's the quiet power. Now, here's the first reframe that usually flips a man's mind. Most men think magnetism is about standing out, but Stoic magnetism is about not needing to stand out. It's the absence of grasping, the absence of performance, the absence of that subtle pleading energy that says, please see me as enough. And the moment that disappears, you don't just become calmer, you become harder to manipulate, harder to shake, harder to read as needy. That's what people call presence. Cultivated indifference means life doesn't get to yank your nervous system around. So, when plans fall apart, when people misread you, when something doesn't go your way, you don't leak frustration into the room, not because you're suppressing it, because you've already made your decision. I will handle what's mine. I won't wrestle what isn't. That single decision changes how a woman experiences you because she isn't bracing for your mood. She can relax. And relaxation is where attraction actually has room to exist. But here's the open loop most men miss. Indifference is not the calm you show. It's the calm you have when nobody is watching. That's why it's so rare. Now add deliberate silence. Most men talk to manage perception. They explain, they qualify, they overshare, they fill space. And the reason they do that is simple. Silence makes them feel exposed. So they talk to cover the exposure. But men who stay silent, men who can pause, look, assess, signal something almost primal. I don't fear the gap. They're not rushing to be liked. They're not rushing to be understood. They're not rushing to prove value. They're listening because they can afford to. And when they speak, it lands. Not louder, cleaner. Now, here's the second reframe. This one is uncomfortable. Silence isn't attractive because it's mysterious. Silence is attractive because it shows self-trust. A man who trusts himself doesn't chase agreement in real time, and women feel that as stability. Finally, embracing scars is what makes the first two traits real instead of performative. Because yes, anyone can act calm for a moment. Anyone can be quiet if they're trying to look deep. But scars reveal what you're made of when life stops cooperating. A man who embraces his scars isn't trying to hide the fact that he has lived. A man who embraces his scars isn't trying to hide the fact that he has lived. He doesn't romanticize his pain. He just doesn't flinch at it. And that does something powerful to how people perceive him. He becomes emotionally predictable in the best way, not boring predictable, meaning he won't punish you for reality. A man who has integrated his past doesn't need to weaponize the present. He doesn't need to control outcomes. He doesn't need to dominate conversations. He doesn't need to be warped to feel secure. So when you put all three together, here's what you get. A man whose calm is earned. A man whose words are chosen. A man whose history is integrated. That's not attractive. That's magnetic. Let's say it plainly. Most people are walking around in quiet emotional debt. They want attention to regulate their insecurity. They want admiration to stabilize their identity. They want control because uncertainty scares them. So, when they meet someone who is not asking for emotional payment, someone who isn't trying to take reassurance, take status, take validation, their nervous system feels something it rarely feels. And relief is addictive. That's why the stoic older man draws people in without a word, because he isn't chasing energy. He's holding it. Now, before you turn this into a checklist, one last perspective shift. These traits aren't something you perform into existence. They're something you remove your way into. You remove the need to be seen. You remove the urge to fill space. You remove the shame around your past. And what's left is you clear, quiet, unshakable. Men who notice patterns instead of reacting change their entire social reality. Men who don't explain themselves for approval start speaking like every word costs something. Men who can look at their own scars without flinching stop fearing anyone else's judgment. If you understand these 3 traits, you don't walk into rooms hoping to be chosen. You walk in already chosen by your own standards. And once that clicks, you stop trying to be magnetic. You just become the kind of man people feel safer standing near. If you're still here, you're not looking for confidence. You're looking for the kind of internal quiet that doesn't need an audience. Because the real shift isn't that you become calmer. It's that you stop needing the world, women, strangers, outcomes to confirm that you are. And this is where most men subtly lose themselves. Not in big failures, not in dramatic mistakes, in tiny moments where they reach for something they don't admit they're reaching for. A reaction, a softened face, a little extra warmth, a sign that they still have influence. Men who don't notice that reach will call it flirting or charm or putting yourself out there. But men who do notice it realize something colder and more accurate. Sometimes the need for connection is real, and sometimes it's just a hunger to feel powerful. Again, that distinction is everything, because women can't always tell what you want, but they can always feel whether you're free or whether you're trying to feed something through them. Here's the first open loop I want to plant and hold for a second. You already know what it feels like when someone is nice, but it isn't clean. So ask yourself quietly, honestly, have there been moments where your calm was actually a strategy? Not malicious, not creepy on purpose, just managed. And if the answer is yes, that doesn't make you broken. It means you were operating without the full picture. Now let's lock the picture into place. Cultivated indifference, deliberate silence, embracing scars. When these 3 traits become real inside you, something strange happens. You stop negotiating with life. You stop bargaining with reality. Like, if I do everything right, I'll be rewarded with affection. That mindset is the beginning of neediness. That mindset is the beginning of neediness. Stoicism replaces it with something cleaner. I will act with virtue. I will carry myself with discipline. I will handle my inner world, and I will let outcomes reveal themselves. That's not resignation. That's sovereignty. And sovereignty reads as safety. Now, second open loop, because this is where the brain wants resolution. Why does a woman often trust a man more when he doesn't push for trust? Why does interest feel better when it's offered with no leash attached? I'll answer it, but not yet. Hold it. First, I want you to notice the pattern behind magnetism. A lot of men think magnetism is what you add. Better stories, better clothes, better lines, more charm. But the most magnetic older men usually have one thing in common. They subtract what makes people tense. They subtract emotional pressure. They subtract the hunger to be validated. They subtract the urge to control perception. And what's left is a man who doesn't feel like a project. He feels like a fixed point. That's the quiet power you're actually after. Here's the answer to that open loop. When you don't push for trust, you're communicating you can survive without it. Not because you don't value connection, but because your identity isn't dependent on being approved of in real time. That is what makes your presence feel safe, because safety is not nice. Safety is predictability. A woman relaxes when she senses, if I say no, he won't punish me. If I don't perform back, he won't collapse. If I disappoint him, he won't turn sharp. That's the whole game. Not seduction, self-regulation. Now, third open loop. This one is personal. If you remove the need to be seen as impressive, what would be left of your personality? Not your achievements, not your resume, your actual presence. That question can make a man uncomfortable. Because some men realize they've been performing competence so long, they forgot what stillness feels like. But men who can face that question without flinching are the ones who graduate into something rare. They stop trying to be chosen. They start choosing how they show up. You won't feel more confident in a loud way. You'll notice it in small, almost invisible behaviors. You won't rush to feel silence. You won't over-explain your intentions. You won't chase a reaction to calm yourself down. You won't treat a woman's warmth as a scoreboard. And when life presses you, because it will, you'll still feel the surge, but you won't obey it. That's stoicism, not philosophy as decoration. Philosophy as nervous system command. Men who stay silent when their ego wants to speak move differently. People who don't explain themselves for approval become heavier in the room. Those who notice patterns instead of reacting stop repeating the same social pain with different faces. And here's the final identity to leave with. Quiet but permanent music. You are not here to extract. You are not here to extract. You are not here to convince. You are not here to prove. You are here to embody a calm that doesn't need permission. Once you understand this, you don't just become more attractive. You become harder to disturb.